A 2015 study found that nearly 40% of all species currently listed as critically endangered are confined to islands, and they have identified invasive species as one of the chief threats to islands' native flora and fauna. For many years, the Channel Islands have been combating invasive species and different ways to eliminate them. Invasive species threaten animals, plants, and the environment on the Channel Islands. Islands are more vulnerable to invasive species because of the lack of biodiversity. The more separated an island is from the mainland, the less native species are on the island. This is called the Species Isolation Relationship, SIR. Animals and plants cannot disperse and create new species through natural selection. Therefore, islands have less biodiversity. Although the SIR relationship works for native species, it does not for non-native species. As islands get farther and farther away from the mainland, the amount of invasive species increases. Also, because islands are separated, the species that have developed on the islands may have lost their ability to fight off some of the predators on the mainlands. Therefore, if a predator from the mainland that is not native is introduced into the environment, it could easily destroy many species on the island. The environment on the island is very fragile, so we must work to protect it at all costs. When non-native plants are introduced into the Channel Islands, it has a negative effect on the environment. Non-native species usually are weeds that grow very fast and spread fast. Because of this, they take over the habitat of species and compete with other plants in the area. This creates less biodiversity. Non-native species also create erosion because they do not hold the soil as well as native species do. This creates erosion and sedimentation of streams. This also harms fish populations and water quality. This can therefore affect the whole food chain because when one species is suffering, all of the other species begin to suffer. Some non-native animals that were introduced into the Channel Islands because of commercial value were cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, bison, and cats. Some species were unintentionally introduced into the environment, such as Argentine ants, earwigs, and rats. Argentine ants were supposedly introduced at Santa Cruz Island by construction materials. Since then, they have invaded 1,000 acres of a 60,000-acre land. These ants have harmed native ants, bees, lizards, and seabird chicks. This is a problem because there are no known enemies of the Argentine ants. Therefore, Santa Cruz Island had to use pesticides to eliminate most of the ants. Pesticides normally cost around $73 per acre. Therefore, it is better to prevent the invasive species because the cost can become very large if you have many acres of land. The use of pesticides is also bad for the environment at Santa Cruz. Pesticides contaminate water, soil, and other plants. Pesticides can also be toxic to other animals like birds, fish, and insects. Santa Cruz ended up training dogs to find the ants. Only one of the dogs was successfully completed the training, and his name was Tobias. Since then, he has successfully hunted down many ants. Even though the dog was hunting down ants, they were still using traps to kill the ants. The project needed to be funded. This is why I believe that preventative measures are the best way to go about helping the Channel Islands and many other islands. Another animal that was very detrimental to the island ecosystem on San Nicolas Island were cats. They were introduced in 1952, and since then, they have threatened the island night lizard, the snowy plover, deer, and the island fox. The island had a very hard time eradicating these cats due to the fact that they did not want to harm any of the native species in the process. They also needed to fund a team to be on the island to make this happen. I believe that because of the globalization of the world now, it is very important to prevent such invasive species from getting on an island. Although it is unlikely that preventative measures will always work, they will certainly help reduce the amount and likelihood of an invasive species hurting the natural environment. Methods of prevention include staying on designated trails, not leaving trash behind, not bringing pets on an island, and searching and cleaning all clothing items and belongings before going on the island. Also, creating specific guidelines for each island individually. It is very important to not bring pets on an island because island foxes are very susceptible to disease and animal droppings can carry disease. It is very important to clean through all clothing and belongings because lots of seeds can attach to clothing items and then be brought on islands unintentionally. I also believe that every island should have its own specific guidelines. The farther away the island is, the fewer people should be allowed to visit. Each island has very specific animals and plants, therefore specific guidelines are necessary measures that should be taken for the reduction of invasive species. This is cohesive with the fact that invasive species only increase as islands get farther and farther away from the mainland. Finally, we need to educate the general public about the detrimental effects that invasive species cause. Thank you.